The smell of brake fluid always lingers longer than you think. It clung to Joe's jacket when he walked in that night, and to the air when he brought Lucas with him. No warning, just a quick call an hour and a half before, "Hey, Lucas is coming by for a bit." He had a thing with his mom. I was standing barefoot in the kitchen, sorting invoices on my laptop, still trying to catch up after a week off. A thing with his mom didn't give me much to work with. But I shut the laptop, shoved a frozen pizza in the oven, and tied my hair back. That's what I do. Handle things. Lucas hadn't been around much. I'd seen him maybe twice in the last couple years, both times at cookouts where no one knew what to say to each other. He was quiet, polite enough, but not friendly. He always felt a little far away, like a kid who learned early not to expect anything. That night, when he walked in behind Joe, he looked older than I remembered, not in age, just in weight. The kind people carry in their shoulders and in their eyes. He nodded at me like I was someone he'd seen on a bus once. I said, "Hey," and he said the same. Two strangers playing family. The pizza was done, and I set out 3 plates, though Joe said he'd eaten already. Lucas took 2 slices without looking up, mumbled, "Thanks." I noticed the edge of a tattoo under his sleeve when he reached for the hot sauce. He ate like someone who forgot what hot food tasted like. After dinner, he stood up with his plate and looked around like he wasn't sure what to do next. Then he walked to the kitchen, looked at the sink, hesitated, and set the plate down in the corner, right where I usually keep that ugly vase of dried flowers. It was a dumb little thing, but the moment stuck, like he didn't know where anything belonged, not even himself. I watched from the hallway, noticed the way he moved, like someone always half ready to leave. Joe was already in the garage, checking something on his truck, like the night had gone back to normal. But it hadn't. Lucas caught me looking. He didn't flinch, just met my eyes for a second. Not cold, not challenging. More like he was trying to figure me out. Like maybe he was curious too. That was the first time I didn't feel sorry for him. The first time I thought, there's something here I don't understand. And that scared me a little. Not because of what it might mean, but because I wanted to understand it. Municipal Court in Tulsa smells like old coffee and bleach. Nothing dramatic about it. Just a worn-out place full of people trying to hold their lives together with duct tape and eye contact. Joe and I were there to finalize paperwork for transferring the title on the house. The kind of stuff couples do when they're technically still married, but already halfway out the door. He'd asked me to come, said it looked better if we showed up together. "Judges don't ask questions when you seem like a unit," he'd said in the car, like we were doing a high school play and I was in charge of smiling on cue. We hadn't shared a bed since February, and we hadn't fought about it, which somehow made it worse. Just a quiet split, like a zipper coming undone, one tooth at a time. Still, I sat beside him in that hard plastic chair, knees not touching, and answered when the clerk called our names. Played the role, smiled when I was supposed to. Lucas stayed at the house, said he'd wash Joe's truck, the same beat-up Silverado Joe used to drive when we were dating, back when he made me laugh more than I cried. I remembered that version of him sometimes, like a TV show I stopped watching but could still quote lines from. When I got home, Lucas was out front, barefoot in the driveway, soaked through in a white t-shirt that clung to his back. The sun had dipped low, painting the whole yard a kind of quiet gold. He didn't say anything when I pulled up, just kept spraying the hood with the hose like he was somewhere else entirely. But he saw me. That night, after dinner, I was in my office catching up on billing reports when he knocked once, then came in without waiting. His eyes landed on a book I'd left open on the desk, an old macroeconomics text I kept meaning to finish. "You read that for fun?" "Sort of," I said. "It's a weird habit." "What's it about?" "Systems. The way money moves. Through places. Through people." "Huh," he said, and then after a beat, "Sounds lonely." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it caught me off guard. I reached for my pen and knocked it off the desk. When I bent to grab it, I saw him watching me. Not in a gross way, just observing. Like he was waiting to see if I'd notice him noticing. I did. He didn't look away, just smiled a little, then backed out of the room. And I sat there, holding that pen, wondering what the hell I was doing. Not because anything had happened, but because I wanted something to. The invitation wasn't really an invitation, more of a statement from Joe over toast. Clyde's turning 50. There's a thing at his place, by the garage. We should go. No question in his voice, no space to say no. Just Clyde, the friend who still smoked inside his trailer and had lawn chairs arranged like he was expecting an audience. Lucas came with us, mostly because Joe barked, "You're coming," as we walked out the door, and Lucas didn't argue. I rode in the front seat, Lucas in the back, the old radio cutting in and out between static and classic rock, and no one said a word for the whole 20 minutes. It was that kind of silence you don't notice until you remember you're in a car with two people you used to feel comfortable around. Clyde's place smelled like beer and barbecue charcoal, the kind of mix that clung to your clothes long after you left. The men clustered around the grill like it was sacred, beers in hand, talking about carburetors and property taxes like the world hadn't changed since 1997. The women, including me, sat on folding chairs under a bug zapper, gossiping about someone's housekeeper who'd been caught in the garage with a teenage boy. It wasn't the story that got to me, but the way everyone laughed, short, sharp little snorts like it was all so far away from their lives. Lucas didn't sit. He stood just behind the circle, arms crossed, half in shadow, half pretending. He wasn't listening. I felt him watching the group like an anthropologist studying a tribe he didn't belong to. When one of the women leaned in and whispered something about the housekeeper's lipstick, Lucas tilted his head and muttered just loud enough for me to hear, "People have weird rules." I didn't laugh. I didn't even look at him right away. I just stared at my plastic cup, filled with lukewarm soda, and tried to decide whether he was mocking us or just quietly calling bullshit. I think it was the latter. And I think I agreed with him. Later, I stepped out behind the trailer to get a break from the noise. The sky had that pale, washed-out look Oklahoma gets in late summer, and the air smelled like burned grease and cigarettes. I found him by the corner, one foot up on the wheel well of a rusted-out ATV, standing quietly, seemingly lost in thought. When he saw me, he didn't flick the cigarette away or apologize. He just held it out toward me and asked, "You want a hit?" I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, but because I hadn't done that in a decade and didn't want to admit how easy it was to say yes. We stood quietly, our hands briefly touching in silent understanding. That contact, it didn't mean anything on the surface. But in the quiet between two people who have too many unsaid things inside them, it felt like something clicked into place. Not passion, not heat, just a shift. He looked at me differently after that, not boldly, not with that chest-out teenage arrogance, but with this calm, sharp awareness, like he'd started a game we were both pretending wasn't real. And I hated how much I didn't want it to stop. I didn't kiss him. He didn't kiss me. But when there was a brief, charged silence, but we stepped back, respecting unspoken boundaries, and I stood there thinking, I don't know who stopped us. But it sure as hell wasn't me. The fight started over something stupid, the way they always do when it's not about what you're saying but about everything else piled underneath. Joe had been gone half the day, helping a guy from the shop replace a trailer axle. And when he came home, he was already in a mood, stomping around, complaining the food smelled weird, then muttering something about the electric bill being too high. I told him I was tired. Not the kind of tired you fix with sleep, but the kind where even your bones feel like they want to be somewhere else. He just looked at me like I'd spoken in a language he didn't want to translate. "Tired?" he said. "You don't even leave the damn house. What are you tired from?" I didn't answer, so he added, real soft, real mean, "I feed you. You remember that, right?" I walked out of the kitchen without slamming anything. That was my version of screaming. I went upstairs, grabbed the duffel I kept in the back of the closet, tossed in a few clothes, my laptop, charger, toothbrush. No hesitation. Just movement. Lucas passed me in the hallway on my way down. He didn't ask anything, just watched. His face didn't change, but something in his eyes told me he'd already decided where this was going. I drove to a motel out on Route 75, the kind of place with a Coke machine that still took quarters, and the kind of front desk clerk who didn't look up from her phone when she handed me the key card. The room smelled like bleach and old air conditioning. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the fake wood paneling, wondering if this counted as leaving or just pausing. 40 minutes later, my phone buzzed. One message. "You okay?" I lied. "Yeah, all good." But I wasn't good. I felt like my skin didn't fit right. Like I'd stepped outside of my own life and was watching someone else live it badly. I left the TV on for noise, flipped channels without watching. I thought maybe I'd fall asleep like that. Instead, at a little past midnight, there was a knock. Not loud. Just a soft, steady sound like he didn't want to scare me. I opened the door, and there he was, hoodie, jeans, phone in his hand. He held up the cord I'd left on the table by the couch back home. "You forgot this," he said. Though I think we both knew I could have gone a day without a charger. I let him. He stepped inside slowly, like he was checking for traps. We didn't talk. I didn't ask why he really came, and he didn't explain. He sat down in the chair by the window, and I stayed on the bed. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was just thick, full of everything we weren't saying. After a minute, he looked at me the same way he had outside Clyde's trailer. Direct, searching, not sorry. There was a moment between us, silent and significant. Something changed irreversibly. Afterward, I cried. Not from shame, not even from regret. I cried because something had changed forever, and I didn't know what came next. He lay beside me, silent, staring at the ceiling like he wasn't trying to forget it but wasn't ready to hold it either. He didn't say he loved me. He didn't say anything at all, and maybe that's what hurt most. The fact that it didn't feel wrong. It just felt inevitable. The days that followed didn't blow up, didn't crash down, didn't offer any convenient explosion to clear the air. Everything just kept moving, like nothing had happened, like the world didn't care that I had crossed a line that made every step after feel slightly crooked. Joe took a couple of jobs out of town, quick generator replacements, out by the highway, paid in cash, barely enough to make them worth the gas. He left early, came back late, didn't ask where I'd been, didn't kiss me goodbye, didn't notice that I never bothered to lock the bedroom door when I went to sleep. Lucas stayed in the house like someone trying not to leave fingerprints. He cleaned, washed dishes no one asked him to, mopped the kitchen floors before I woke up. He barely spoke to Joe, barely spoke to me. But when we passed each other in the hallway, or when I caught him in the corner of the yard washing the truck, again for no reason, his eyes always caught mine. Not like he was daring me, more like he was waiting to see who I'd become now. And I found myself watching the security camera feeds on my laptop at night. Not because I was worried about intruders, but because I wanted to see him moving. Through the kitchen. I'd rewind to the moment his back passed the fridge, or when he leaned over to pick something off the floor. I didn't know what I was looking for. Just presence. Proof that it wasn't all in my head. I found myself subtly aware of his presence, adjusting small things in my routine to acknowledge it without speaking. One afternoon, I opened the fridge to grab the milk, and he was already there, leaning on the counter, the door open, his shoulder brushing mine when I stepped closer. The contact was brief, but not accidental. I turned, met his gaze, not in defiance, not in fear, just looking, really looking. He said, almost too quiet to catch, "You're not sleeping with him, are you?" I didn't lie. I asked, "Do you want me to?" His jaw clenched. He looked away, not like he was uncomfortable, but like he was doing the math on what might come next if he answered honestly. He didn't say anything. That night, for the first time, I didn't close my door. I didn't hear him walk down the hallway, but I didn't sleep much either. And in the silence, I knew he'd passed by. I also knew he'd stopped, and I lay there, not sure if I was hoping for footsteps or terrified I'd hear them. It was Joe's idea to spend the Saturday cleaning up the old boat launch west of town, something about giving back and getting out of the house. Though I think he just needed to feel useful in a way that didn't involve fixing engines or getting reminded of how broken things were. Behind our front door, we took 2 cars, though we pretended that wasn't strange, and Lucas rode with me, both of us pretending that the silence between us didn't mean anything, that the occasional glance at the glove box or the side mirror wasn't loaded with all the things we hadn't said since that night in the motel. The station hadn't been used in years. Weeds tall enough to brush your thighs, boards slick with mold and rain, everything smelling of wet wood and forgotten promises. Joe tossed me a pair of gloves without looking at me and pointed to the lower dock, said we'd start there, and I didn't argue, just walked toward the water and tried not to think about how slippery it looked, or how much I didn't want to be seen. I don't remember exactly how it happened. Just that 1 minute I was stepping around a busted board, and the next I was on the ground. The sharp crack of bone inside my own body louder than the splash or the scream I must have let out. Joe didn't see it. He was too far up the hill, swearing at a nest of hornets near the trash pile. But Lucas saw. He was already moving before I could even register what was wrong, already down the dock, already lifting me up with both arms like it wasn't the first time he'd had to carry. Someone who couldn't walk away on their own. I didn't speak. I just held onto his hoodie, and he didn't ask if I was okay because he already knew I wasn't. When we got to the car, I could hear Joe calling something behind us. A question maybe, or a half-angry joke. But Lucas didn't answer, and I didn't either. He buckled me into the passenger seat like I was made of glass, and drove fast but steady, one hand tight on the wheel and the other hovering like he wanted to reach for me but didn't know if he should. At urgent care, Joe caught up. He paced while I got x-rayed, made small talk with the nurse, then barely looked up when they told me it was a fracture. He offered to help me into the truck, but Lucas already had my crutches, already held the doctor open, already nodded like this was something he'd expected. A few days later, we shared another quiet moment. This one softer, careful, as though trying to understand something beyond words. Afterward, I looked at him, not to find answers, but to be sure he was still real, and he whispered, not softly, but with a kind of clarity that left no room for misunderstanding. I'll hate myself if you go back to him tomorrow. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to, because the next morning, I was still in the house, still married, still walking the same floors and making the same coffee. Sunday morning started like any other. Sunlight too bright through the kitchen blinds, the slow whir of the coffee maker, the low hum of the fridge, and the kind of quiet that wasn't peaceful, just stretched thin. I had already been awake for an hour, sitting at the kitchen table in an old sweatshirt with my ankle propped up on a dining chair, pretending to scroll through emails, but mostly just waiting for something to happen, though I didn't know what I expected or even wanted. Lucas came down first, barefoot, still damp from the shower, a bowl of cereal in his hand and nothing in his face to suggest that anything had shifted between us, except maybe the way he didn't look away when I glanced at him, the way he didn't move quickly, the way his presence filled the space between us like it had every right to be there. He leaned against the counter and ate silently while I refilled my mug, neither of us pretending we didn't notice how close. Our arms came when I reached for the cream. It wasn't coy or flirtatious. It was just real, just there. Something already past the point of wondering if it would happen again, and that's when Joe walked in, not with a slam or a shout, not with a dramatic pause or accusations in his eyes. Just walked in like he always did on Sundays, flipping. Through his phone with the casual half-awareness of someone who believed the world still belonged to him. He poured a cup of coffee, sat at the table, and didn't even acknowledge the oddness of finding his wife and his son sitting quietly in the same kitchen, alone, at 8 a.m, with the weight of something unsaid thick in the air between them. Lucas stood a little straighter, set his bowl in the sink, and walked out without a word. Not fast, not nervous, just gone. Joe didn't look up right away. He sipped his coffee, set the cup down, scrolled his thumb down the screen once, then finally said without changing his tone or his posture, "You know I'm not stupid, right?" I didn't answer. I didn't ask what he meant or pretend I didn't understand. I just nodded. He didn't accuse. He didn't raise his voice. He just stood, took his cup with him, and left again like there was nothing left to say. And maybe there wasn't. An hour later, his ex-wife called. The kind of call that comes with too much urgency to ignore. Her voice was thin and sharp, like she was trying not to cry or scream, or maybe both. "You know he's in therapy, right?" she said before I could even say hello. "You know he's in recovery? For pills? For drinking? You know that, don't you?" I didn't. The words landed fast, all at once, and I sat down hard like my body knew something my brain hadn't caught up to yet. I wanted to ask how long. I wanted to ask if he'd relapsed. I wanted to ask why no one told me. But instead, I just sat there, holding the phone, hearing her breathe on the other end, both of us suddenly connected by something raw and unbearable. Not betrayal, not quite guilt, but something between the two. Lucas hadn't told me. Not once. Not when he'd shown up at my motel door. Not when I let him into my bed. Not when he asked me, quietly, if I was still sleeping with Joe. And now all I could hear, louder than anything else, was his voice from that night, whispering that he'd hate himself if I went back. Maybe he already did. He picked the place, a little restaurant downtown with too many windows and soft music that made you feel like you were supposed to be at peace, like nothing urgent could ever happen. in a room filled with carefully plated brunch and people in clean shoes talking about wine. I arrived 5 minutes early and waited in the car, watching couples go in, watching the door swing open and shut, and trying to remind myself that I had agreed to this, that I had said yes to one last meal without asking myself what I thought it would change. When Lucas walked in, I almost didn't recognize him, not because he looked different exactly, but because he was holding himself with a kind of posture I hadn't seen before, his hair shorter, his shirt ironed, his expression calm in a way that felt distant. Not like detachment, but like someone who had already made peace with something I hadn't even fully admitted to. He hugged me when I stood, and I let him. Though, it didn't feel like a beginning or an end, just a gesture meant to soften the sharp edge of what was coming. We didn't order right away. We barely looked at the menus. He just sat across from me, both hands wrapped around a glass of water, and when he finally spoke, his voice was steady. No tremble, no rush, just plain, like he had practiced saying it out loud to himself. Mouch. Leaving town, he said, and then paused long enough for the air to shift between us. I need to get away. I need to do something that's mine. And you're not mine. He didn't say it cruelly. He didn't even look at me like he wanted me to fight it. He just said it the way someone might point out that it's raining. Not because they caused it, not because they can stop it, but because it's true and unavoidable, and standing in it too long will leave you soaked. I stared at my napkin for too long, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I knew that anything I said would make it worse. Because I wasn't angry, and I wasn't surprised, and I wasn't even broken, just hollow in a way I hadn't expected. I nodded. That was all. I nodded like someone who finally sees the shape of a room when the lights are turned on, and there's nothing left in the corners to pretend about. We didn't hug when we left. He paid the check, and I didn't stop him. Outside, I turned one direction, and he turned the other, and I didn't look back. When I got home, Joe was sitting on the front step, the duffel bag with Lucas's things already zipped up and waiting, beside him. He didn't say anything at first, didn't ask where I'd been, didn't accuse me of anything, just stared at the dirt under his boots like it was easier to speak to than me. Then, after a long silence, he said, "You'd have betrayed me even if it hadn't been him." I didn't answer, not because he was wrong, but because it didn't matter anymore whether he was right. I had already crossed too many lines to find the starting point again. He didn't cry. I didn't either. And just like that, the choice had been made. Not by me, not even really by Lucas, but by the slow accumulation of every moment we hadn't said what we needed to, when it still might have changed something. It was a Tuesday evening, and the house was quiet in that specific way it only is when something has finally settled. Not peacefully, but in that resigned kind of stillness where you stop expecting the phone to ring or the door to open or the person you've lost to come back, even for a second, just to say they didn't mean it. I had just finished a client call, my laptop screen still open to spreadsheets I had scrolled through without absorbing a single number, when my phone buzzed. Once, short and unassuming, like a shrug sent through a machine. It was from Lucas. There was no text at first, just an image. A photo taken in the kind of warm lighting that restaurants use to make everyone look a little softer, a little more whole than they probably are. He was smiling, and next to him was a girl I didn't recognize. Young, probably younger than him, with short black hair and a silver hoop through her eyebrow, wearing a hoodie with a band name I didn't know and leaning into him like she belonged there. She had the kind of easy grin people have when they haven't ruined anything yet. Beneath the photo, the message was short, not in length, but in intention. "This is Emma. She laughs at all my dumb jokes. I'm clean with her. I'm clear. That was it. No punctuation, no softness, no question about how I was or what I'd been doing, or whether I ever thought about the last time we saw each other. Just a clean, quiet boundary drawn across a screen, the kind of message that doesn't break you with its cruelty, but with how unnecessary it makes you feel. Like the book you almost finished but forgot on a plane, like the song you couldn't. Remember the name of once the radio changed? I didn't cry. I didn't throw my phone or call him or try to read between the lines like I might have weeks earlier. I just stared at the photo, at her arm resting on his chest like it was easy, like it hadn't cost either of them anything to get there. And then I smiled, not from happiness, not even from spite, but the kind of smile your body makes when it's trying to convince your face that you're not completely hollow inside. I deleted the message. I deleted his number. I deleted the thread so thoroughly that I couldn't even go back later and pretend I had meant to save it. But I didn't delete the image in my head. It stayed. It stayed when I brushed my teeth, when I folded towels, when I walked past the bedroom door. I used to leave open for him. It stayed when Joe came home and dropped his keys on the counter without looking at me. And it stayed when I turned off the lights each night and laid in bed without checking my phone, because there was no longer anyone I was pretending might reach out. He had found someone else to be clean with. To be clear, and whatever we had, whatever it was, had already started fading, not from anger, not from time, but from the simple fact that he didn't need me to remember it. So I didn't forget. I just learned how to carry it quieter. Had been exactly 14 days since Joe left. Not that I was counting in the obsessive way that meant I wanted him back, but in the way you count how long a wound has been healing just to measure whether or not the scab's still tender. He hadn't called, hadn't texted, hadn't even asked about the ankle that still throbbed in the mornings, and I hadn't reached out either, partly because I knew there was nothing I could say that wouldn't make it worse, and partly because some part of me was afraid he'd answer and say everything I deserved to hear. He came home on a Thursday evening, just before sunset, the kind of slow-burn light that makes everything in Oklahoma look nostalgic whether you want it to or not. I was on the porch, folding laundry that had dried stiff on the line, and I heard the truck before I saw it, that low, uneven rumble that had once made me feel safe, but now just made my stomach pull in tight. He didn't look at me when he got out. He didn't ask what I was doing, or make a joke about the sheets, or even glance at the empty driveway where Lucas's car hadn't been for more than a week. He just walked past me with his duffel bag slung over one shoulder, went inside, and dropped it near the front door with the kind of weight that let me know he didn't plan on picking it up again anytime soon. Inside, he poured himself a cup of coffee from the half-full pot I'd brewed that morning and sat down at the kitchen table like he had every right to still be there, which legally he did. He took a sip, grimaced, and reached for the sugar the way he always had, like nothing between us had been split, bent, or set on fire. I stood in the doorway, not saying anything, not even sure why I hadn't walked away yet, and he looked up, at me with eyes that had always seemed older than the rest of him. Tired eyes, mechanic's eyes, the kind that only look for damage they already expect to find. "I forgive you," he said, not kindly, not like a gift, but like a statement. Of fact, but I'm not going to forget it. And then he went back to sipping his coffee, and I realized, in the slow silence that followed, that this was how it was going to be now. Two people sitting in the same space, breathing the same air, carrying different ghosts. Neither of us brave enough to say the thing that would let the other go. He didn't ask where Lucas went. I didn't offer. He didn't ask if I missed him. I didn't lie. We just kept moving. Through dinner, through the nightly news, through dishes washed in silence. Like people who had agreed, without speaking, that pretending was easier than acknowledging that something in us had died, and the other one had watched it happen. And as I lay in bed that night, listening to him move around in the guest room down the hall, I realized that grief doesn't always come from losing someone. Sometimes it comes from getting them back, just in the wrong way. The laundry still needs folding. The dishwasher still hums. The mornings still come whether I sleep through them or not, and I still check the mail like something unexpected might arrive, even though it's always bills, coupons, or postcards for dentists I'll never call. I wake up, I make tea, I walk through this house like it's a place I rent from someone who used to love me, and I do what people do. I go to appointments I don't need, just so someone will ask how I'm doing and give me a moment to pretend. I'm not unraveling in ways that don't show on charts or scans. Joe still lives here. He makes coffee in the mornings and eats cereal standing at the sink. Sometimes we pass each other in the hallway, nod politely like neighbors who share a thin wall, and then keep going. He doesn't ask questions anymore, and I don't offer anything up. We exist in a sort of quiet truce built on exhaustion. Not forgiveness, not healing, just a mutual decision to stop bleeding in front of each other. There's no passion. No shouting, no late-night confessions, just two people with memories that don't line up anymore, and a history that no longer feels like a shared one. I think sometimes he forgets what we were before things went sideways, and maybe I do too. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the forgetting is the only way to survive it. Lucas is gone. I haven't heard from him, and I don't expect to. He's somewhere else now, probably starting over in a place where no one knows the shape of his past, where no one recognizes the heaviness behind his smile, and where he can be clean like he said, with someone who didn't meet him in the middle of a mess. I think about him more than I mean to. Not like a woman thinking about a lover. More like someone remembering a fever. How it took over. How it burned. And how strange it felt once it was gone. Sometimes I think I imagined all of it. That maybe it was something my mind built during a season of loneliness too long to hold on its own. Other times, I know exactly how real it was, because I still feel the consequences of it in every small thing. The way I flinch when I hear a car pull up. The way I still pause before opening my bedroom door, like there might be someone on the other side. The way I look in the mirror and see a version of myself I don't quite recognize. Someone quieter. Duller but not empty. Not yet. This isn't regret. This isn't longing. This isn't even guilt. Though I suppose all of those things still float beneath the surface like driftwood waiting to be seen. This is just life. Stretched thin and continuing anyway. I still laugh sometimes. I still fold towels with their corners, lined up just right. I still whisper thank you when the doctor asks how I've been, even though I don't believe my answer. I'm still here. I wear this body like a coat I didn't pick. I smile at neighbors who don't know my name. I water a plant I secretly hope will die so I can stop pretending I know how to take care of anything. And the worst part isn't that I lost something. It's that I remember what it felt like to want. And now I don't.